is going on in the market? What are we seeing? I'm sure everybody's first point of interest is just your projections for 2025.
Yes, projections for 2025. We're kind of gearing up for hopefully a stronger spring market. That's pretty typical, right, in real estate. Market predictions for interest rates, we'll start there. Between 6 and 7% probably throughout the year is pretty expected. So they'll likely go lower than 6% if we enter into a recession. They'll likely go 7% if inflation is on the rise. And kind of the biggest thing on the horizon that everybody's watching is the Trump administration as they come into office. What does that look like for policy changes and kind of the future economic status of the country? So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. I would say generally, a lot of the predictions are that home appreciation is still there, right? Like real estate is a long-term investment. So there's value in building equity with real estate. So between 2 and 4%. To put a dollar amount on that, if we just go for like 3% on a $400,000 home, that's like $12,000 in appreciation and equity that you're gaining in just 1 year. So for most people, that's awesome. That's really great. And it could be more or less depending on the area that you're in. So that's kind of an overview of what we're looking at in 2025.
So rates aren't going to skyrocket down.
Oh, we wish.
We wish.
If there's a chance. I wouldn't say that's very likely at this point. I'd say if we can get to 6%, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
We're in like the high 6% range right now. So
yeah. I think like just to put that into perspective though, like that is good, right? And that would you say is normal-ish?
Yes. And I would say what I've heard a lot is that it's become a more balanced market. So there's room for negotiation for buyers, sellers. There's a little bit more time on market. It's not as much of a high speed, crazy transaction rate that we've seen in 2021, 22. So I'd say it's generally balanced. I think it's a pretty reasonable, everybody's kind of getting used to like, 6% for a mortgage isn't totally crazy. And they're adjusting to it. So I think that's the key factor is that it's becoming more of a balanced market. And I think that's just people are more comfortable. So that's good.
That's good. More people just jumping back into the market. Have you had more people call you as far as, hey, I'm ready to buy, or what's that look like for you personally?
Yes. For me personally, I have had quite a few inquiries in just the last 3 weeks or so. And I think it's really people, one, had a little more time off around the holidays. So they're like, oh, I have a moment to actually call a mortgage lender, which is great. And then the other thing is, I think they're anticipating 2025, we want to buy a house, that New Year resolution kind of idea, goal planning, whole perspective brings a little bit more buyers right now, which is great.
That is great.
And we're excited. And so I'm doing a lot of planning. I have talked to, I think it's 5 or 6 different self-employed borrowers in the last week about projections and tax planning purposes. What should my tax returns look like to optimize the most I can qualify for on a mortgage. I've talked to them about non-conventional or non-QM products. So that means a bank statement loan or an investment loan or something like that looks a little different than a traditional loan. So just running through a lot of different options for self-employed borrowers right now.
I was going to say, it sounds like there's just excitement in the air for a lot of people heading into this new year.
I think so too. And I'm very hopeful. I'm also excited. I think it can be a really strong year this year, just with a little bit more of a balanced year.
Yeah, for sure. So what is and I think overall it's always been buying is better thing, but with the way that things are going and where interest rates are, where are you encouraging your buyers there?
Yes, that's a really good question. And it kind of goes back to real estate being a long-term investment, right? Yeah. The biggest thing is renting is going to be better if you're short-term in a location or in a place. And then it comes back to what can you qualify for? If you can only qualify to buy $180,000 to $200,000 purchase price, that quality of home or life might not be what you need. And so also just thinking of, where are you financially? Do you have enough financial buffer to take on home maintenance, costs and expenses? Do you have enough finances to put down a down payment, And a lot of people right now, finances are tight. And that's just the reality of where we are, especially with inflation where it is. Credit card balances are higher, car loans are higher.
Especially coming out of Christmas.
Yes, especially. And so just being mindful that you don't want to be putting yourself in a position where your household poor.
Sure.
And that means just your house expense is so high that you can barely have a good quality of life in other areas. So we want to make sure you're eating well and you have enough, room for savings and things like that. So I think the biggest part of the puzzle that people miss when they're thinking about renting versus buying is they're intimidated by buying. They don't know what those numbers actually are. And so I think the biggest thing to figure out, like sit down with Emily or myself, and like we will chat with you about what that actually looks like to buy a home, what the actual expenses are. So you can have a dollar amount on it. And that should help like if you're not there yet, when would you be there and when would you feel comfortable? So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like really being realistic, I guess.
No, that's huge. It is about being all realistic. I was talking to a buyer not that long ago, and she was like, well, we're just waiting for the market to shift. And I said, tell me what that means. And they honestly couldn't give me a straight answer. And so we just delved into then like what would need to happen in order for them to be prepared for a house. And so I think, if this is something really that you want to do, don't just put up a wall and say, well, when it happens, it happens. Let's prep and plan on a way to get you there, because most things in life don't happen just because they happen. So, and that's what we're here to do, right? To help you get there, in it for the long haul.
Yes, I totally agree. I had a borrower just a couple months ago, and I was like, I just don't think it's the right time for you to buy. And I explained to her kind of why that was. And it really came down to she had such tight financial situation. Like she barely had enough money in her account to make the minimums. And I was just like, it'll be so much more comfortable for her. She just waits a little longer. The market will still be there. The
market will still be there. And I think that's too, when you're talking to people, make sure that they're not advising you in a bad way. Like Hailey said, like she doesn't want you to be house poor. And so we want you guys to succeed as well in your home purchase. And we don't by any means want you to come back to us in 2-3 months and be like, I feel so stuck. That's not at all what this is trying to do. And with that being said, Hailey, are there any programs going into this year? I think that everybody is really excited, but also to be wary of, like, are there any programs that are better or things that buyers should be on the lookout for as they enter the market this year?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say, kind of to preface that question, my answer to that question is you should feel like you're with a loan officer who's educating you on all of your options. Ultimately, as the consumer, you are the one to make the choice, but you can only make a choice if you're educated on the options. And so that's what I really love to do for my clients, is make sure they're fully informed. And the biggest example is a conventional loan versus what are the drawbacks, what are the benefits, and the comparison between those two options, which is most commonly what first-time home buyers are, comparing between our, conventional loan versus FHA. So just be wary of, there's a lot of costs with an FHA loan that are not necessarily disclosed up front. So just be mindful of that. Conventional, it has its own costs and fees and things, but being mindful of what those are and how they exactly compare on like a short term, like what's your cash to close number, your long term, like how much interest are you paying, how much are you paying in mortgage insurance over a 5-year period, over a 10-year period, like what does that look like? And so making sure you're kind of doing an analysis on a cash to close basis, but then a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year projection.
Nice. Okay.
So that's something I would definitely recommend. One thing to be really shy about, down payment assistance programs. They can be awesome, but be shy about them because there are a lot of strings attached. And so just be really mindful and dive into what those programs mean, what's attached to them, what does that look like, again, on those projections, the 1-year, 5-year, 10-year, in terms of your cost, what are your opportunities to refinance that loan? Maybe you're going to be on a long-term plan to refinance. You couldn't refinance, in the short term, things like that. So down payment assistance programs as a whole, just be wary of those and be, cognizant of that. And then one thing that I think is really good that I wish people utilize more were seller credits. And so there's still opportunity for those. It's huge. And I think people are intimidated to ask for them. Some, agents aren't sure how to negotiate for them, what to ask for and how to use it. And I think the other side is, once you get a seller credit, make sure your lender is showing you at least 3 to 5 different ways you can use that credit. Because there really is more than one way. And it can be so helpful. The close number on your monthly payment number to use a seller credit, it's a huge advantage. And so I would say, don't be shy about asking for credit, negotiating for credit, pushing your agent to ask for like what's possible, what can we, give and take here. And then also make sure to go to your lender. I've seen lenders who just give a blanket answer. Here's where we put the seller credit, it's on your closing costs. Well, there's more than one way to do that. Like maybe that is the best, but there's more than one way. So I don't know. I'm pretty passionate about that one.
It's so big, and people come to me, especially first-time home buyers, and essentially I just tell them like, hey, we're gonna ask for 3% in seller concessions, because why not? Like, especially with the way that the market is. And on the other side too, for the listing agents, when you're in a certain price range, like that listing agent should be prepping their seller to, hey, this is likely an ask that's going to be put in here is for seller concessions. And so if that conversation on the realtor side isn't happening as well, guys, I mean, I think that's awesome. Hailey's saying it is a huge advantage to you as a buyer to ask for that in so many different ways that it can be used to get you to the closing table.
Yes, absolutely. It can really go from, maybe you needed down payment assistance, now you don't. Maybe you needed a, $2,000 payment. It was originally at, $2,200. Now we're at $2,000, because we got the seller credit. So just a lot of things to consider there.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of that discussion, like that's just so much excitement that's going on, and there's so many different options. And so as Hailey was saying, like if it is something that you want to look into for this year, whether it be, maybe your lease is up in September or October, really get into it now and start having those conversations. Don't wait to the last minute to see if it's even an option for you. Because as Hailey said, maybe it's not. And so maybe we need to work to prepare for that. So, but I think as well that it's going to be a really exciting year. I think there's a lot coming out, and there's just honestly a breath of fresh air in the area. So I'm excited as well. And so if you have any questions or want to get started, just reach out to me or Hailey. Our information spread all over, and we'll get going.
Sounds good. Thank you.